Hi, and welcome to the Pinball Podcast focused on the innovators and makers who are crafting homebrew, custom, and rethemed pinball machines, the technology that makes these personal projects possible, and the companies helping with these journeys. Custom pinballs are a deeply personal and technically challenging undertaking, requiring time, money, knowledge, and most importantly, the desire to make it happen. I'm Dan Rosenstein, your host. Join me and let's go under the playfield and see what's needed to make a custom pinball possible. So this month we have Ernie Silverberg from Georgia on the show. Welcome to the Pinball Innovators and Makers podcast, Ernie. You have had quite the amazing pinball innovator and maker journey. Why don't you tell the listener a bit about yourself?
As Dan mentioned, I am Ernie Silverberg. I've been in the custom homebrew pinball scene, if that's what you want to call it, for about really since last April, I guess is kind of when I got started.
That's amazing that it's only been just about a year. Keep going.
So, and I have and my wife gives me a hard time for it, but I have a personality where I kind of jump head first instead of feet first. I'm not really, guess maybe thinking of everything before I jump in. I kind of just go for it. I kind of got started. I have always loved pinball. Played it, wanted a machine. As we all know, pinball machines are really expensive nowadays. They've always been, but it's even more so now. So I kind of got started as virtual pinball and I built my own machine.
Oh, cool.
Got into virtual, put everything, spent hours and hours and hours setting up tables and setting things up. And it was fun, but then I would go to one of our local places, pinball places, and play and come back home and play the virtual, and it just didn't do anything for me. You could tell the difference in the feedback. You could tell the difference in just we'll call it lag from the virtual versus the real thing. Like you push the button and the flipper moves, it's completely different. So kind of sat there and I was like, I wonder if I can build my own machine.
and so the rabbit hole begins.
Yep. And as I'm sure we'll get into it, there's tons and tons and tons of outlets for people to start building their own machine, different ways, and no wrong way to do it.
No, totally no wrong way. So it's pretty cool you started in virtual pinball. When you built your cabinet, did you do full force feedback, all the haptics? I've got a virtual cab as well. So did you get into all that, or you really went just for just full size? Did you focus on just the VPX games, or did you do FX3 and Pinball Arcade, or what? Tell me a little bit about the virtual pinball since we're the intro.
It was a full standard size pinball machine. I had SSF, so the sound feedback, surround sound feedback set up. So I had the bass shakers and the tactile. Can't think what those speakers are called right this second, but basically mount them to the surface and they vibrate the surface to make the sound. And had those. So I mean, it was realistic enough with the surround sound that if the ball was going around an orbit, it sounded like it was going from left to right or right to left, but it wasn't. I didn't have any solenoids in there, so there wasn't any real type of physical feedback other than the bass shaker that would shake a little bit. But it was very similar to maybe a bass shaker on a pinball machine, but not quite as violent.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've got a road show, and that shaker is crazy violent. So on my virtual pinball cab, it's a much more subtle shaker. So so awesome. So you started to talk about how you got into pinball. So what is your origin story? You've been down this custom route for just over a year. You did a virtual pinball before that. What's your earliest memory of pinball? When did you first gravitate to the silver ball?
Probably, I couldn't tell you what my age was, but sometime in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Just at an arcade playing, and it kind of always stuck with me. I've always been a gamer. Consoles, computer, right. League of Legends, tons of that. Hence the custom pinball. But,
yeah. Okay. Do you remember the theme of the pinball or anything specific about it, like the very first time you played, or it's just a memory that's kind of hazy at this point?
I don't know that I could tell you exactly what game.
Okay, no worries. So what types of games do you like? You said you played virtual. You also gone and played physical. What are some of the things you like in pinball machines? And what are some of the ones you really like to play?
So for me, like I mentioned earlier, I kind of jump headfirst into things. Probably somewhere ADHD. I like all of the more modern games with the larger LCDs for the DM screen with all the different modes and all the different paths that you can take in a game. Not to say that the older games are not as fun, but I kind of gravitate towards the more modern just because there's a more to do and a lot more, I guess, going on as you play.
Mhm.
As far as like the virtual, I gravitated a lot towards Ghostbusters Premium on
Yep.
there. And that one I think I played, man, I probably played that game more than any other table on the virtual.
It's done really well. The folks who made it did a really good job with it.
Yeah. That and Medieval Madness a lot, which I enjoy. I enjoy that. The real game of that as well, just as
Mhm.
much.
Anything else? Any other classics or more modern machines you would say?
Um, Adam's Family. So
Of
I
course.
really like Adam's Family, which it's one of the most popular. So I think a lot do, but the we'll get into it later. But part of League of Legends is kind of comes from Adam's Family to a certain extent.
One could say the heart and soul of part of the game, and we'll definitely get into that later on. Do you own any games right now other than League your League machine?
No, I am actually in the process of. So I've had multiple older games where I've bought them and resold them. I'm in the process of getting a Avengers Infinity Quest.
Oh, fun.
Um, I have another one, but I'll talk about it off podcast. Some people will get the reference, but
Okay.
uh,
Um.
I have my most recent was a Data East Simpsons,
No, it's my daughter's favorite machine that we have.
and I actually like it, and I considered not retheming it, but keeping the same theme and adding code to it.
Oh, cool.
And I may still do that one day because I actually like the game okay. The biggest thing about that game is once you get so far, there's only so many things you can do.
Exactly.
And
I've
then the
my
go flat.
yeah, my I'm not a very good pinball player, and so Data East Star Wars, the listeners are all going to laugh, but the Data East Star Wars or the Data East Simpsons game is pretty much like to my capability. Like I'm lucky if I can even get the multi-ball in that game in any given game. I can't get above 4 million points, so I love the fact that you're thinking about recreating the code on it.
Well, if
That's
it
awesome.
makes you feel better, I normally tell everybody that I suck at pinball, and that's the reason why I built one so that I can kind of cheat and actually win a game.
I'm gonna. That's the best reason to build a pinball machine, as far as I'm concerned. I may upset some of the listeners, but I truly feel that there's two different groups of people in pinball that there is an overlap, but there's really like you're either a Beatles person or an Elvis person, and in pinball you're either one who really likes the technology and then starts to go down the custom and homebrew path, or you're really a player and you just really like to play as many games as possible. And people overlap, but I feel that people really end up in one side or the other of those two
Uh,
camps. And
I would almost 100% agree with that because I think like I love playing pinball, of course, but when I'm playing, I'm like, man, I really think I enjoy building machines and coming up with ideas and putting things together more than I probably enjoy playing the games.
You're plucking the right chord, because that's exactly the way I feel. And by the way, just to make it clear, I don't think one is any better or worse than the other. It's just people are wired different. So speaking of that, let's actually go into the theme. Your theme, like you said, is League of Legends. And how did you pick the theme? Tell the listener a little bit more about how you got into League and how you decided that was going to be your machine.
Okay, so I've played League of Legends since I think 2011. I think it was like the end of season 1, so their first ranked season. That towards the end of that is when I started playing League of Legends, and I, for probably the first 7 years, probably played it every day, multiple games. As I could, because I've got a family and I always had full-time jobs, and so as I could, but I would every single day I played it, at least a few games, and kind of was really into it. And then over the last few years of I still play it on the weekend, and I'll play a game here and there. I don't play it probably as religiously as I used to. But when I started kind of trying to come up with ideas on what to do, that was the first thing that came to my mind, because I really like the game. They have a ton of game lore to pull from. There is a lot of YouTube cinematic videos that they've done over the years. So they have like this whole story behind League of Legends, and they do tons and tons and tons of, I want to say there's like 4 or 5 hours of cinematic to pull from on YouTube. All kinds of items available. And then I also think I kind of went for that because most of your pinball machines that come out are all based on 80s, early 90s items, which gravitates to probably the crowd that is actually buying them, but it's not bringing in a lot of the newer crowd. So I think different games that are more focused towards, I think video games is a great outlet for pinball, because you have somebody that already plays a video game. To jump over to pinball, it's completely different, but it's still the same. You need to do these set of things to win a match.
Right. It's interesting because so I'm a very big gamer also, but I'm a little bit older than you, not too much. But my gaming really was on the Nintendo and then the Super Nintendo, and just a little bit of Atari. I kind of miss that. But by the time, you may not know, and the listener may not know, I worked on the original Xbox, and and so like gaming has been in my blood and my lifeline for quite some time. But by the time League of Legends came around is when my first daughter was born. And so I'm actually not familiar with the property at all. So I actually went and started doing research about, like, I've known it was out there. It's like, you can't not know, but I didn't know anything about the lore. I didn't know about the cinematics. And, I had watched some of an interview and some information as I was gathering about you that you had passed to me in prep for this interview. And I actually got more and more interested. And so I started reading more and more about League of Legends. And I totally understand why you decided to choose this. Like, it really, like, I've never played the game myself, but I can see from the lore how great it would make for a machine. And then as I saw the evolution of your machine, I saw like it come to life. It was pretty amazing. And we'll talk about that journey. Now, you chose a very specific aspect of League of Legends, the Battle of the Baron. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yep. So I wanted some form of an upper play field on the game. And during a match of League of Legends, there's an objective called the Baron Nashor, which is like the match's biggest monster in the jungle that you can kill. If your team defeats it, you get a huge buff that sometimes can lend to a team coming back and even winning a match, even if they were losing a lot.
Ernie, can you comment for what a buff is for maybe the 1 or 2 listeners that might not know?
What is that?
What is a buff?
So a buff is a attribute given to you once you complete a reward for doing some kind of a skill shot, I guess would be the best way to match it to pinball.
Got it.
Kind of like a bonus multiplier.
I see. Perfect analogy. Sorry, keep going.
No problem. So with wanting an upper play field, I wanted something on the upper play field that made sense to kind of get to and defeat and hit and have something to bash. So there are 3 items in a League of Legends match that you have to destroy to get to win the game. One is a tower, which is like a defense tower for a castle. It basically has a gun turret that shoots at you if you get too close. There's a inhibitor, which is kind of like a base. We'll call it a base, like a mini base. And then there's a nexus, which is like the main item that you destroy to win the match. So those are kind of boring. So I didn't want, the main aspect of the game to get to a tower that is just standing there. So that's where I kind of gravitated towards the Baron, which is a moving monster that attacks back and, has a health bar. Interestingly enough, I don't actually have a health bar set up on him yet in the game, and I don't know that I'll have it before TPF, but it's kind of the final idea for it. But there are targets to hit, so there is something on the upper play field. But yeah, that's kind of what drove it. I wanted something interesting. Also, when I first started, I didn't know how Riot Games, are the developer of League of Legends, I didn't know how they would be towards me using their IP.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to be able to name it something that wasn't just League of Legends pinball, just in case that there was some kind of an issue there.
Got it.
Luckily, they have been super cool. They basically said, as long as I don't sell it, they don't care.
That's awesome. That's really cool that they're supporting that, actually.
Yeah, very supportive. I've even had a couple employees of Riot reach out, and one of them sent me like in-game Riot points, which is like to use in their store. I mean, it's been pretty cool.
That's pretty awesome. So I want to cover your design process, but before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about how, once you kind of started going down the homebrew route, what skills did you bring to the table, and what were some of the very first things that you either sourced or found or learned or did in order to get started with your Battle of the Baron?
Okay, so I would say part of the start was me playing virtual pinball, playing different games, and kind of saying what kind of game do I want? What do I like about a pinball, and what do I want to put in my game? So I played a bunch and came up with different things that I really, really liked. And then from there, looked at kind of what kind of pinball controllers were available, kind of more so took an approach, maybe not so head first, and seen what was available, what you kind of could do with everything that is available. And then kind of started there. I originally decided to retheme an old Gottlieb touchdown.
Oh, okay.
It had kind of and at that point, I was going to kind of base it on League of Legends match itself, where you have a lane, you have to go down that lane to destroy a nexus and a tower. Kind of started off very simple, and I probably got a week into it, and I said, man, I'm going to hate this if I finish it, because I'm going to think it's boring. So kind of took a complete jump back, and then started looking up I had already kind of found what files were available for play fields and things like that. And then I found a local guy that actually, he cut a play field for me, had never done anything for pinball, and now the guy cuts all my play fields for me from some of the kits I do, and pinball cabinets and all kinds of stuff. But had him cut me a blank from a Williams. It was a Williams, based on the Williams. And started off with that, and kind of just brought it home, and had found some 3D printed ramps, and started setting shots up. I knew that I wanted 4 skill shot lanes in the very middle, with 3 pop bumpers below it. I like that in games. I like having a skill shot up there that you have to do with the plunger. And then I love pop bumpers. And in my game, I actually have it linked to the shaker, so every time you hit it, it kind of gives you some feedback. And once we get more into the actual league design, how it matches, there's some things I've done on the pop bumpers that, if you're a League of Legends player, it makes it even better.
Yeah, we'll get into that in just a couple minutes. I'm super excited to have that portion of the conversation. But while we're here, you mentioned a couple of things that I want to key in on, and I think the listener would be interested as well. You mentioned 3D printing, that you 3D printed some ramps, and that the trough was 3D printed as well. Did you already have experience with 3D printing, or did you pick up 3D
I
printing as you took this on?
No, I had already had experience with 3D printing. I've done some custom truck parts in the past
Oh,
for
cool.
Super Duty trucks, and I actually did a lot of printing in that with some custom adapters for using some different stuff in the trucks.
Gotcha. Did you CAD that up as well, or was that
I
was
did.
that
No, I did CAD that up.
that's awesome.
Which I not to say that I'm some great modeler. I am horrible at it. But so the 3D printed trough, you mentioned the 3D printed trough. That was actually the file was given to me by Greg Brault. And Greg, if I'm screwing up your last name, please don't kill me. But so he if you can look him up on ohmbrew.net, OHMBREW, he's doing the Bear Fest custom pinball. He does awesome with his models, and he actually shared those with me, and that's kind of what got me started on my game, is using his lower third he let me use, and then I kind of just took the back half, and I took a Comet, I think. I had a spare Comet playfield here that I picked up off of Facebook, and I used the back orbit off of it. So that the back orbit on League of Legends is from Comet. And then kind of set that in there, and then started just messing with shots.
And as you were messing with shots, so although you had experience with virtual pinball, you actually went, to use your words, head first, and started doing a physical design and basically getting 3D printed parts, the playfield and CAD, and getting that CNC'd. You built out the lower third. You built the part from Comet. How were you laying out your shots? What were you using for that?
That was just me, head first approach, putting things on the playfield. At that point I had my Cobra pin flipping, so I would either screw in, because it was just it was a playfield that I knew I was going to destroy, and then do another one. I would screw the ramps in, try it. If it didn't work, I'd sand down the little hole and move the ramp over just a little bit if I needed to. And then kind of what drove my design, I mentioned the Comet orbit, and I knew that I wanted an upper right flipper and some kind of a ramp shot on that left side. During the course of that, had got on eBay and found a used Addams Family ramp. Ordered that, and it came in, and I was like, okay, cool. That I cut the ramp in half. So took the right entrance off and only used the left entrance, and kind of got that set up. And I was like, okay, cool. That's the kind of shot that I want. And then what I eventually did is I kind of stayed with that design, and I kept ordering. I think I ordered 2 of the Ramp-O-Matic boxes. He does, Jody does a random box of blemished ramps every so often. I bought one time, and then a couple months later I bought another one. But in that first box, I was able to get a ramp that was very similar to the Addams Family, but had a little bit better angle. And I cut and modified that using it in a wire form to make it work for the left side.
That's so cool that you had the wherewithal, and that you had found, basically finding used ramps that might have blemishes, etc., but the ramp still works. Like, you can still make shots, you can still do layout. And so I have a feeling that after this interview, there's going to be a run, not just to Jody, but also just to people that have random boxes of like old ramps from the last 30 years.
Yeah. And I think the biggest driver on a lot of it is, I'm sure most, the listeners, even yourself, you work a full-time job. I'm not rich. So I'm trying to find items that are attainable without breaking the bank. So that was kind of a way to do it, to where I could get a large lump of items, and go to my heart's content on testing shots. And I'll say that up until the point to where I put the last piece of vinyl overlay on my playfield, I couldn't even tell you how many times my shots changed just a little bit.
So why don't we get into the design process at this point? So did you start any of your design in visual pinball, or you went straight to the physical?
I tried when I was doing the touchdown Gottlieb, when I was going to do the retheme on that, I downloaded that table and started in there and trying to set things up.
Mhm.
And it would have been another thing just to learn on top of everything else, that I kind of did it for maybe a few days, and then I was like, I'm just gonna
Just go in.
just go for it and come up with something.
Gotcha.
Which is probably not always the smartest approach, because it can be kind of frustrating sometimes too, because you work one thing out and then it doesn't work the way you want it, or something else comes up to where you're like, oh, now I got to change that.
Look, Ernie, I'm an engineer, and we're taught to do all design first, and then go into implementation and refine and get to manufacturing. And the reality is, like, as a maker, you just want to kind of jump in and not necessarily do it the engineering way.
Yep.
Like, you want to start head first. So I totally appreciate, like, you don't have to do it the classical way that it's taught. And in fact, getting that tactile feel is why many of us are in pinball in the first place. So I applaud you for going in, and that dovetails to, you're actually on the third revision of your playfield, at least what I saw from the videos. Is that correct? You're on your third at this point?
Yep,
Yeah.
I believe that is correct.
And in one of the videos, you made a very funny comment, which was, you're fixing Bob Ross happy mistakes. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
So yeah, that's a good one, because I actually do think it's true. Where I say it's frustrating when something has to change, there's been a lot of times along the way where something's happened. I'm like, man, that would be really cool to move it over there, and that would make it just that much better. And then move it, and it's like, the bells and whistles are going off when it happens. And that's been some of the coolest moments. And then even some of the moments where it's been like, I've told a couple people this, where you like almost jump in the air and do like a fist pump, where it's like so gratifying. That was like, man, that is awesome. And I think, so you said you were an engineer by trade. I actually went to school for computer engineering.
I didn't want to tee that off without you saying it first. So I had seen that on one of the videos.
So I went to school for computer engineering. I have always worked in manufacturing facilities, and I am like the world's biggest person maybe against the engineering approach, because there's a lot of, not that there's anything wrong, but there's engineers that think it has to be in a book to do it that way. And if it's not in a book it says it, then you can't take that approach. And I'm like so far to the other side of that, because I think some of the best things come from mistakes, or just something that happens and you're like, man, that would be really cool.
Yeah, in fact, just dovetailing off that, Bree Pettis, who's one of the people that's credited with really pushing and founding 3D printing and having started MakerBot, he very famously has been quoted that if he was an engineer, we would have never gotten 3D printing. Like, the only reason that 3D printing happened was because it went against some of the engineering basics and the engineering guidance that was in books. So
Yeah.
I definitely take I follow that advice in the work that I do, outside of work and even at work. You also made another design choice around RGB LEDs for all the lights. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
So we had talked a little bit earlier about the custom truck stuff that I did, that I 3D printed for. So part of that I did was a custom speedometer cluster. And I used WS2812 RGB lighting in it, Bluetooth controller that would you could make that cluster look any color. So when I started this, RGB is just awesome. I know not everybody loves it on pinball, but the fact that you can have an insert and make it absolutely any color you want, or go from one color to another, to me is amazing. And to me, if I walked up to a machine and had all just cool white LEDs, I'd be like, all right, that's cool. But if I walked up to, like Jersey Jack's huge with all their RGB, and you gravitate to it almost.
Absolutely.
Not to mention too, is you can almost get an infinite amount of shots off of one insert because you can change it by color.
Exactly.
So one time this color is this shot. The next time you're doing the same shot, but because the color is different, it seems like a different shot. And then, I don't know, there's probably people, and you may have heard of X lights for like Christmas lights, where you can design whole shows with music and stuff like that. I've done that in the past as well.
Oh, cool.
So I had a lot of experience with the RGB lighting and the usage behind it. So, and that was probably maybe the easiest part for me to grasp of all of it.
That's awesome. And then just for full clarification, your GIs are also RGB, like that, just to make
every single light on the game is RGB.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the evolution of your machine, but one of the things that I thought was extremely interesting was also how your ability and what you programmed in the light shows evolved over the time that you were building the machine. You can definitely tell that from where you started, not only did the physical layout of the machine change, and not only the physical structure and the materials, but also your capabilities with the lights went from a start to absolutely outstanding. So before we go into the design evolution, we started talking a little bit about parts that you had chosen. And you had said you were trying to do it, you got the used ramps. You talked about, cutting some of your own pieces, building the lower third. Why don't you talk about where you got parts from? You've got some interesting places where you source parts from.
Yep. So started out buying old kind of trashed playfields. I tried not using anything that was considered good, just because it's against the holy rule to use an old playfield. But no, so I started trying to find just more items that somebody was not going to use, and then I would just pull items off of it. And you said you had watched the interview from the Southern Fried Gaming Expo. I think every part on that machine was from another machine at that point. So, and I maybe had a total of a few $200 worth of playfields that I pulled all the parts off. So it was fairly cheap. Most everything on it was 3D printed except for the couple. The ramps were 3D printed at that point as well.
Yep.
Which was actually the Addams Family model that I exported out of Visual Pinball and then spliced and cut and printed. So kind of started out there. Then once I got it going and went to Southern Fried, had quite a bit of play that weekend. There was a lot of times where I just had it in a track mode because balls kept getting stuck and I wanted to walk around and do other stuff.
Sure.
And once I got home, I was like, man, I probably really need to get all new stuff and just do it. So I started sourcing Pinball Life, Marco, just here and there I would pick up parts. I actually found a guy on eBay that had bought items from a Deep Root auction. So there is probably about 30 to 40% of the parts on there were actually Deep Root.
Oh, cool.
Items, the trough, the flippers, slingshot. I think the slingshots were as well. The pop bumpers, I did get those off of eBay. Those were used. I haven't replaced them, but I haven't had a need to replace those.
So you also according to the videos I watched, you built out your own wireform assemblies with what looked like 3D printed connectors.
Yep. So kind of shout out to Ryan that did the Sonic Pinball. He had uploaded some connectors onto Thingiverse. I downloaded those and then just bought some 3mm steel rod from Amazon. I think they're about 12 inches. I think each one, 12 or 15 inches. I don't remember. But then I just basically would kind of look at the design. I've kind of worked in the power industry, and back in my younger years had bent conduit and stuff. So not an expert, but it kind of helped, trying to figure out the angles to turn and things like that. Would bend it and then just use the connectors to connect them. Thingy, huge shout out to the people that put items on Thingiverse, because it goes a long way. There's, for anybody that hasn't checked out Thingiverse, there are tons and tons and tons of parts on there for pinball machines.
Yeah, and do you want to just say what Thingiverse is real quick?
What is it?
Yeah.
The URL?
No. Like for the listener, what is Thingiverse, just so they know?
Oh, so Thingiverse is a website where people can upload their 3D models that they make. You can download them for free. Everything's free on there. And you can find absolutely anything on there. If, you may have something that breaks in your bathroom that somebody's uploaded on there that you can print and replace it. It is probably one of the best websites for makers to find items on, especially for people like me that are not as good at CADing and modeling files. If it's something basic, I can do it. If it's something more advanced, I have a hard time.
So let's move on from parts at this point and actually talk about your design evolution, Ernie. The first thing to note is that your oldest video is 10 months old, or just about, give or take. And the cool thing and I watched every single one of the videos you posted. You posted about 1 to 2 videos, sometimes 3 videos in a given month. And one of the most amazing things that I saw was the true progression from almost when you started to all the way to, where your machine is just from a couple days ago, and how all 3 of your playfields progressed, how the design progressed, how the light shows progressed. So, let's start with, how often do you work on your pinball? How often do you work on League?
I would say sometimes I try to work on it a little bit every day, even if it's only for 30 minutes to an hour. When I first started, about after the first 3 weeks, month or so, I had a working, somewhat working playfield. And then I found out about Southern Fried Gaming Expo. So I was like, I want to make something work before that show. So that kind of lit a fire, and I kind of went full force, going back to the head first, the ADHD. I get kind of hyper focused on items and just started doing it. And like I said, those happy little accidents led to one thing to another. And from April to, we'll say July, because that's when the show was, I went from a white wood with that barely had any shots to a white wood with 2 ramps, 3 drop targets, multiple targets. I had a couple kicker targets on there to begin with that were from the Gottlieb touchdown, which another shout out to Ryan that did the Sonic Pinball. I was trying to come up with a design with that, and he actually took the time to draw something up, sent it to me, and said, maybe this will work.
Oh, seriously?
So, yeah, seriously, because I would just ask him questions here and there, and he was a huge trooper with helping me along. So those eventually came out because it slowed down the game too much. Not his design, but the layout of how that kind of worked out once I got towards the more final. I think it's more the hyper focused, and I kind of get wrapped up in things and just want to go with it.
See, it's interesting because for me, like I get in these zones, and my wife like totally makes fun of me about it, where I can go on like a 20-hour like intense coding or building, and then like it just flows and flows, and then it stops, and then I can go for another 4 days, and then again it's like a mad rush like that. And I've always wanted to be someone who could just chunk it out and work in like little bits every single day, because I think I would actually be more productive if I had the approach that you take. So I want you to know, like, I really, really admire that.
I think both approaches, not to cut you off, but
yeah,
both approaches kind of make sense, because like with me, there was a lot of times where I probably shouldn't have touched it that day and either screwed something up
interesting.
or drilled the wrong hole, and it's like, I had 3 playfield progressions, but I have probably had 9 whitewoods.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So I have had more where I've like messed something up and then got another one cut and continued on.
So one thing that I've noticed is that you joke about taking the head first approach and starting like going basically physical first. but it's very, very clear in watching through your videos that in your head, you had the design and the layout and the plan. Like, even as you talked going back to like, why the Baron? And you were like, because then there would be an upper play field and it would be like, you were designing this game, even in, working on it 30 minutes or an hour every single day and going through three renditions and nine Whitewoods. You clearly had a plan. So talk to me and the listener about how you chunked up that grandiose plan into small digestible bites.
I would say that the biggest advice in the way that I did it is to not be afraid to screw something up. I think a lot of times people will come up with a design and like, well, that may not work, but it might work. So I always took the approach as like, even though I wasn't physically working on the machine throughout the whole day, when I was that initial, I was thinking of, what could I do, or what I would lay in bed at night for 2 hours thinking of different things that, what can I do to make it a little bit better, or what should I do? And I did, you mentioned kind of me seemed like I had a plan. I had always knew kind of what my design was. Most of the revisions and things that I changed were just small placement items or different things that popped up along the way that were like, oh, that would make a lot of sense to have that there. But I think with the Bob Ross approach, I kind of got lucky with some of it too, because it just kind of fell into place. And everybody that's played the game so far has said that they like the layout. I would say that it's not the easiest to hit the shots. I would say it's probably towards the harder side. But I guess coming up in a couple weeks at Texas Pinball Fest, I'll get some feedback from people.
You for sure will. So the one thing that didn't come through from the videos is, well, let me say it this way. There's a lot of music playing in the background when you're playing the game. Okay. Yep. And you're recording it. What wasn't clear to me was how much of that music is the game music and how much is like you have the stereo on in the background.
So anything that you've heard in the videos is from the game.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
But most of, depending on what aspect of it, if it was the track, there's a lot louder music and a lot more. There's some videos there just because I wanted to make it pretty and, attractive since it's a track mode. But during the game, there's music that plays. There's different sounds, different voices, like any pinball machine. And then I have it. So one thing we haven't touched on is I wanted all three, my back glass, my scoring screen, and the playfield monitor. I wanted all three to work together so that you could have a back glass that could play videos and change, but not take away from the scoring screen. I also wanted something, when I play pinball, I can't, going back to not being good at pinball, I can't look up at the screen and keep the ball going. So I wanted something in the playfield so that people could have call outs there that say, hey, you need to hit this shot without looking up. And the videos, I think most videos on pinball machines are meant for the people watching, not the person playing. So that's kind of the approach I've taken with it. And that was kind of more selfish towards me, as that's how I prefer to play. So that's kind of how I designed it.
And like you said before, when you started with that Gottlieb touchdown, and you got into it for about a week, you were like, I'm not going to play this game. Why would I go and build it? So yeah, if you're not building it for yourself, like, your job one of what you like to play. That little screen, I'm glad you noted it. That little screen is a really, really awesome touch. I saw in the videos how you have the score, the next mode. You've got like very specific call outs that are being written there. I'm with you. I can't lift my head during play. I can barely, trap a ball while I'm in multi-ball. So I hear you on that. You, at some point, you moved to metal ramps and clear ramps from plastic. You moved to from custom bent habit trails to with the 3D pieces to a full wire form. Like, your machine over the months took this level of polish after, I don't know, about 2/3 of the way through it. Like you put
It's
down your
probably
playfield.
August, September. So that was kind of after Southern Fried. Got feedback. I had people at Southern Fried that had come up to me and they're like, "Hey man, I've been watching your build on YouTube or Reddit or and that was kind of it was really cool for people to go, but like, hey, I know who you are. So it kind of pushed me. I'm like, people that, and there's nothing wrong with it, but most homebrew games always still look like a homebrew game,
Right?
And there's nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to make my game look like a real, commercial pinball or as close to it as I can get. And I think we'll say half of what people like about games is the theme.
Yep.
And how attractive it is. So I wanted to make it look as best as I can, because the hard thing for my build is most pinball players do not know what League of Legends is. So they see League of Legends, it's just like, what is that?
Right.
And that's kind of been a hindrance towards, I think just even traction of people following and things like that, is I think the theme has kind of, certain people, we know how people talk about all the new pinballs, whether they like Foo Fighters, whether they like The Godfather, and oh man, that's a horrible theme, blah, blah, blah. So
yeah, so there's two levels of polish that come very clearly in your machine. One is the artwork. Actually, I should say three. One is the artwork, one is the light show, and the other one is your visual mechanisms, the ramps, the habit trails. They look professionally made. And so talk for a minute how you went from 3D printed prototypes of those pieces to what ends up being on your final revision or your current revision of the machine.
Okay, so for like the ramps and things, I mentioned the box of Ramp-O-Matic ramps was a large selection in there, and there was something in the box that I was able to make work for that. And basically what I did is it was from, I don't even remember what, I think one's from Gold Wing or something, and I'm not sure what the other one's from, but basically just used the entrance of those ramps and then cut them and then took wire forms and made those work.
So those wire forms are from other machines as well.
They are from other machines.
Oh,
now
okay.
Some of them have been cut, and then there's two of them that I've cut two and put them together to make it work. Some point down the road, I'll probably move to try to make my own just with a spot welder. But I've been with this one, I've been able to make it all work, and it's not, the wire forms are not, maybe one of them in particular are not the exact design that I am 100% happy with, but it's a design that works.
And it has that level of polish you're talking about.
Yep.
It looks like a professional wire form, which is why I called it out. So talk to me about the artwork. Who did the cabinet and playfield artwork and the plastics as well? And like, did you do that yourself or
no? So the playfield and the cabinet artwork, I used an app called Fiverr.
Okay.
So it's an app where freelance artists go on there and they kind of tell what they're trying to do. I found a guy on there that had not ever played pinball, but had played League of Legends, and his artwork was kind of what I was shooting for. So I really like Zombie Yeti's artwork and kind of his designs, the Ghostbusters, things like that. That kind of real comic looking design is kind of what I was after. Found this guy. He knew League of Legends. I already kind of had a playfield layout set up. I originally, so kind of to sit back, I had two things of artwork. The first one was done by a guy named Mike Allman of Can You Print This? He's out of the Carolinas. He did that. That was the one that was at Southern Fried in that video. Was happy with it, and he did a great job, but I wanted the more comic approach. So then this guy, I think the guy on Fiverr was, I think I paid like $100.
Oh wow!
For the guy to do the artwork. So, and I already had somewhat of a design. I had an AI, an Illustrator file of the playfield cutouts, and then I kind of gave him direction on kind of what I wanted, and then told him to kind of just go with it as far as the characters and the design in the back. And there was like maybe two revisions, but overall he did awesome. Like knocked it out of the park.
It looks incredible. So if you were to tell somebody else, tell the listener who's going on their journey, they're a year back, they're just getting started, they're buying some ramps from Ramp-O-Matic. What guidance would you give them about artwork? Like, would you suggest to go the Fiverr route? Are there things that they should do up front before they reach out to an artist? Are there lessons you learned that you would suggest?
No, I think making sure 100% what theme you want to go with, which kind of drives everything anyways. I think being 100% on your theme or as close as possible is probably number one. Number two is Fiverr is a great route because there's all kind of artists on there for every style, and they're fairly inexpensive as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a great route. My back glass artwork is actually done from somebody on there.
Oh wow!
And I think I paid like $10. I mean, so it's super obtainable on there. And then and I would think just Fiverr, and there are some individuals out there that do artwork for a living that mm-hmm. are obtainable. I think there's a few even on the pinball Facebook groups. I think they do a great job. I think it comes down to what you want and then kind of what financial backing you have, because somebody that's a real professional is going to be a lot more expensive.
So no, that's super good information for the listener and for me. I had no idea about Fiverr. Like this is why I like doing this podcast. I learned a bunch of stuff that I had no idea, and it's definitely not a one-man show or one-person show, I should say. So let's actually take that forward. So you've about 4 months ago, you've got this level of polish on League. The machines come together. You've got your artwork, and you're like, I'm not done. So you decide to go start Trident pinball homebrew kits. And yep. Like, I want to talk with you about that, because you've gone from in just over a year from never having built a pinball machine to having an extremely polished pinball machine, and now starting a company that you build homebrew kits for others to get started. So like, tell me why did you go down the journey to make the kits? Let's start there.
So I think I mentioned earlier about one of the biggest things that people can do is to just not be afraid to start. And I think that probably stops 90% of the people from actually building their own pinball machine, is that they're afraid that they may not have the knowledge, they may not have the design, they may not be able to come up with it. So no, I kind of realized that there's not really anyone out there that you can't even really find anybody on Pinside that sells playfields. Mm-hmm. I think Cruiseman does recovers, and there's a few people that reprint them, but there's nobody that really just does custom cut playfield. So right. I somewhat of a hustler, so and not in the negative sense, but
no.
I saw the need that was there, and if I go on Pinside, I look at the homebrew forum. Mm-hmm. I read some of the other stuff, but I mainly go to the homebrew forum, because I like seeing what other people come up with. I mean, there's some, like Kyle that you had last time is an absolute genius when it comes to designing and coming up with everything. I mean, I've seen some of his posts just on the Facebook groups and even a couple other groups. And I mean, some of the stuff that he posts on his designs, and he's doing it all himself.
Yeah.
I would never be able to do that, but, and then there's other people that, they're afraid to do the coding. So I saw the need of a kit that comes with everything. It's a little bit of wiring, but it has absolutely everything that you need in one kit. It's pre-configured, so you can wire everything up, and it comes with instructions, plug it up, and then basically have a machine flipping.
And so you say it comes with everything. Take the opportunity to do some advertising. What's it?
Okay, so it comes with a pre-cut whitewood with the lower third cut. If you have a cut file, I can cut the playfield to any specification. So if you have inserts or pop bumper locations, things like that already, I can cut that. And no price difference on that. It comes with 3 pop bumpers, 2 flippers, 2 slingshots, the slingshot posts, rubbers, flipper bats, flipper rubbers, the lane guides, a few pieces of the black covered wood for the side rails, the switches for the lower third, so your 4 in lane, out lane, and then your trough switch. Comes with the trough. And then trying to work on something that is not included yet, but maybe if I can get enough, just some blemished ramps that I can maybe throw in a couple little ramps just to get somebody started.
Ernie, in just over a year, you have your own pinball company. Like, how crazy is that? That's so cool. That's so admirable.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I, taking small steps, and, hopefully, I've sold a few of the kits so far. I think there's one is the the Friday the 13th. I don't know if you've seen that on Pin Side, but
I have.
By Mud Flaps. That's one. And then there's a guy doing Labyrinth that bought a kit for
and it's super cool that not only do you have a pinball company at this point, but you're also helping others share the love. And the way I got introduced to you was through Facebook on the Strictly Customs group, and I think Pinball Enthusiasts as well, where you posted that you were doing this. And then I started, this was right around the time where I was working through what I wanted to do with the podcast. And so I started backtracking, seeing some of the other work you had done, found your league machine and where you were there. But one of the things that I noticed very quickly was you started an entire Discord and a full community around homebrew and custom built machines, where there's conversations about programming and another area for machining, and how to do rules and how to deal with the control systems and build cabinets, like artwork, everything that music, everything you'd want. You built out this community. And one of the cool things, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, is because you leverage the community to get started. You leverage the community and work with the community through the first year and a half of your journey. And now you started to contribute in a scaled way back to the community, not by just delivering a technology and a product, but also the help to get others bootstrapped. And just like yesterday or the day before, I was on Pinball Strictly Customs, Jake Danzig's group, and noticed that somebody had asked a question of something you did on League with your playfield monitor, the small monitor, and you said, try to do something like this, and you sent a picture, and it had to do with using a static image with animated text on top of it. And I was like, oh my god, I'm totally like witnessing the evolution that Ernie's going through and the journey you're going through. So talk to me about community. Talk to us about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, this is my favorite part, because honestly, there's a few people. The Greg Brault that I mentioned earlier, he's been a huge help with the initial design, and even some coding questions. I've done programming in the past, but there's things in there that I get confused. I'm not the greatest programmer, but he's helped me through a lot of it. Mike Becker of Fight Club, he has helped me a lot with some of the coding, just here and there with different questions. The company that I work for my full-time job is out of Seattle. He lives near Seattle. I came the week after a show and I was like, dang, I missed it. He actually invited me to his house to play Fight Club at his house.
That's awesome. So I'm in Seattle as well. So the next time you're up here, like let's grab a beer. I'd love to sit down and talk.
But yeah, no, I don't think that I definitely would not have made it as far as I did, as quick as I did, without the community. And, I would go as far to say that not even just the custom, but almost all of the pinball community, other than on Pin Side, is very helpful. Very helpful towards everybody. It's everybody's willing to help. Like in Georgia, we have a local group called GAPIS, which is like Georgia Pinball Association. I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's an email chain, and people sell their machines. They ask for parts, and it's just a group of people that help each other. And a lot of times people are just, hey, you can have this, or hey, you might help with this. So I mean, it's I think community and having a group of people that you can ask a question, because sometimes you may know the answer, but you need to bounce it off of somebody to say, hey, is this the right approach?
Right.
And just even having somebody I've worked through problems myself just by writing it out to ask somebody a question. And I'm like, oh, that's the way, kind of work myself through it. So I did create the Discord, and Discord, I don't know that has been done before. Discord is a great server because it saves all the chats.
Mm-hmm.
You can break it up into multiple groups. The fast guys use Slack, so they actually have a fast group, and that it's a great group of guys on there. Biggest thing there is that it only saves so much history. So if you want to see something that somebody said in the past, it's hard to find.
Right.
Just wanted to create a group kind of that had everything to where anybody could access it and then get it. And it's I think you have to request to join the server, but it's open to everybody.
Yep. And in the show notes, if it's okay with you, we'll post a link to folks who are interested. So with that, let's talk about what's next for Trident Pinball and for you. So in one of your clips, I saw something about a Goonies pinball.
Yeah, so I have a design so I mentioned earlier about a lot of people not knowing what League of Legends is. So I had posted, I think it was on Pinball Enthusiasts on Facebook one day, and said, hey, if you guys wanted to see an 80s, 90s pinball, what would you want? Goonies was one of the highest one. I love the Goonies. So I was like, maybe the Goonies is the one. And I have a working design that I think will be absolutely fantastic.
So I'm a Goonies head. I love Goonies. Okay. When I saw that video, I went back and looked because I'd seen, there are some custom Goonies tables before. And just because somebody's done it before, it doesn't mean it shouldn't be done again. Like, this is your own project. This is your own vision of what it's going to look like. And like, it's great that you're going down this journey. And I'm sure it's going to be absolutely awesome. It ends up, as I started looking at Goonies tables, there's at least 2 virtual pinball ones.
Yep,
and I found 3 other Goonies pinball machines. So I think, even if you don't include the digital ones, that Goonies has been done in homebrew and custom, either tied or more than any other pinball machine. And I think it's awesome that you're going down this route because we need a new Goonies machine in our lives. Like, I cannot wait to see it come together.
Yeah, and I know I haven't seen. I knew there was one other custom one. I'll have to get the link from you for the other one just to see kind of what.
Ernie, it very well could be that it was somebody rebroadcasting the same one. I looked at it. I thought it was different, but I'll send you the links.
There's one that's a retheme of something. I don't know what game they rethemed, but it's pretty cool. It's what they did with it. But yeah, no, that's kind of what I landed on. It was between that, DuckTales and Princess Bride.
Oh, three great choices, man. So
that's kind of what I've landed on so far. And I think hopefully I wanted to have it ready for TPF, but it's not going to be ready. I probably looking more like maybe Chicago, the expo at Chicago.
My plan is to be at Expo, and I would love to see it and see you. So you talked about TPF a few times. That's kind of the next big milestone, and you're going to be bringing an amazing custom, an amazing homebrew to TPF. Are you entering it in any contests? Is there?
Well, actually, so nominated for a Twippies for the best homebrew. So hopefully, if I at least get a runner up, if not, I'm up against a great group of people. I think I've met everybody that's been nominated this year. So, like I said, Fight Club has been a huge inspiration to me. I actually was one of the ones that nominated him for this year. Jake has done a lot for the community with the strictly custom group. That was actually the first Facebook group that I found that I started looking through to find out kind of what was available.
Jake does a fantastic job with that group, and I wouldn't be here without Jake either. So
then Bob with Elf, and then what is it, Pinsanity?
Yep.
What is it, Pokemon? That guy is awesome. He actually did a League of Legends machine too. I don't know.
Really? I didn't realize that.
He's only posted. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, he's only posted, I think, 1 or 2 videos of it, but it was actually at the expo this last year.
Yeah. Jake has a encyclopedia recall of custom machines. I'm not at that point yet. You know, so if there is another one, I hadn't seen it. So look, here's the thing. Obviously, there's a number of, like you said, very amazing builders, makers, innovators who are going to be at TPF. There's a lot of very innovative machines as well. You know, whoever wins definitely will deserve it. I'm super happy and super excited for you that you're in the running. That you know you're going for it. Within just over a year to have gone from really, you know, playing on a virtual pinball all the way through to building your own machine, which is amazing, designing your own light shows, going through multiple different revisions of it, going on that maker journey, and the innovation you've had. Like, you've come to the show and talked about numerous different ways that others can get involved, your innovation in the community. Your machine speaks volumes for who you are and how you go about things. And I wish you the best of luck without taking away anything from the other nominees for the best custom and homebrew. I wish you good luck. I can't wait to hear what happens at TPF. I'm excited to see what happens with Goonies Pinball, and you know, I'd love to hear more about how Trident Pinball is going. What are some of the ups and downs? What are the, you know, trials and tribulations? And so I'd love to have you back on the podcast if you're willing to do it.
Yeah, for sure. I've enjoyed it and had a great time, and appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I know it's a upstart podcast, and to be one of the first interviewees really means a lot. So thank you.
Thanks for joining the podcast. Thanks for listening, and I can't wait to see what you make.